What is going on, gunfighters? Are you excited about a brand new episode of Gunfighter Life? By God's grace, I got an idea for a lot of episodes. State of this caliber in 2024. Just kind of like the State of the Union address, but for a caliber. What's the state of, 9mm in 2024? What's the state of, 5.56, 308, 40 Smith & Wesson? I don't know if I'm going to do all those calibers, but you get the idea. I'm excited to get you guys some new content because I've been doing a lot of tactical reload episodes because I've been professionally gunfighting to make some money while this podcast, God willing, becomes a full-time income. If you want to make that happen, if you want to be part of that, check out the Patreon link in the show notes. With that, welcome to Gunfighter Life, where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, calibers, the right way with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Let's hit up this bio, and then we'll get into the main topic. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one in my life. I grew up hunting and fishing in the backwoods of the southeastern United States at a very early age. Some of my earliest memories are with firearms. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. By God's grace, He got me through that safely. After that, I served as an instructor, an urban warfare instructor, and a desert warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I also served with the LAPD, both full-time as a sworn police officer and in some more specialized assignments, as well as serving in the U.S. Army, full-time and part-time National Guard. I've been a FBI firearms instructor, still am an FBI firearms instructor, have been for a lot of years. Also NRA certified and some other three-letter government agency certified. I've been a private contractor for a three-letter government agency I won't specify. I've been the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. By God's grace, He got me through all that in one piece, not because I'm better, but because He chose to have grace and mercy on me. I've been a professional hunter and guide. Professionally hunted things like buffalo and elk. Not many people today can say they've done that, but I'm blessed to be able to say that I have. I've hunted everything from white-tailed deer on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast to gray squirrel on the East Coast to prairie dog on the West Coast and elk and bear and wolf and slain all manner of beast. A state rifle and pistol champion a few times over in a few different disciplines. Now those experiences, it's not because I'm bigger or badder. Certainly not bigger. In fact, I met one of the patrons in real life, and he said something to the effect of, "I thought you'd be bigger." Reminded me of that William Wallace movie, where he's like, "Oh yeah, if William Wallace were here, he'd shoot lightning bolts out of his rear end." Well, I'm not William Wallace, but I am the person that did all those things in the bio. But not because I'm bigger or badder. I don't think that I survived when many other young good men did not. I give all the glory and all the credit to God, all the talents and experiences that He's given me and the things that He's let me live through. I hope to use them to glorify God and to help you today. So if I boast in anything, it's not in my strength, it's in that God had mercy on me and saved me because He had a purpose for me. And hopefully I can use those talent, skills, and abilities to serve you today. State of the Caliber Address, 10mm edition. So it's probably no surprise if you're in the gun community that 10mm has seen quite the resurgence in the past, 5 years or so. It's not a new cartridge, but it kind of came out and then was pushed to the back burner by 40 Smith & Wesson, which I think is one of the worst calibers of all time. And it saddens me that it exists. Not because ballistically in and of itself it's a bad cartridge, because somebody somewhere that probably wasn't a big shooter said, let's shove this 40 into a 9mm size gun. That'll be great. and then people actually had to shoot the thing. And just, to me, the power to weight ratio is just way off. The shootability of that handgun is just horrible. I will not even argue that round per round it's a more powerful round, but you can usually shoot quite a bit faster with 9mm in a similar size and weight gun. So, in my opinion, and this is maybe controversial, but it's a big reason why you're here, I guess. To make the 40 Smith & Wesson shootable, you generally put it, in my opinion, in a 1911, 2011 style gun, like the old STIs, the STI Edge. Those are great, but that's a 1911 size gun. If you're going to do that, why not go to 10mm? Because that's the same overall length as 45, and there's less. I believe, I'm not a firearms engineer, but engineering-wise, it seems a lot simpler to engineer a gun from 45 to 10mm than from 45 to 40 Smith & Wesson. So why wouldn't you just go with 10mm? And I think many people also have realized that, and 20 or so years after that cartridge came out, they said, well, why the 40? And I would agree, why the 40? Again, it saddens me that cartridge even exists. But it does. But it's got one foot in the grave and it's quickly dying. It's on its deathbed, thankfully. But the 10mm seen a bit of a resurgence, which kind of makes sense to me, because if you're going to go 40, why wouldn't you just go all the way to 10? If you don't know, and I'm not a historian, I'm not a firearms historian. If you want that, go to like Forgotten Weapons. He does a great job on that. But there was the FBI Miami-Dade shootout, and they fired a bunch of rounds. They hit the guy once, and the round failed to stop him, and they kind of blamed it on the 9mm not being effective enough, and they started looking around, and they looked at the 10mm. And the 10mm was good ballistically, but a lot of people could not handle the recoil, so they kind of, in my opinion, halfway neutered it and made it the 40 Smith & Wesson, the worst of both worlds. You still got a bunch of recoil, and you didn't get the effectiveness of the 10mm, and they shoved it in a 9mm size gun. Had they shoved it in a 45 size gun, maybe the history would be different. Although if they had, they probably would have stuck with a 10mm. I believe one of the guns they tested it in was a Colt Delta Elite. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. The FBI decided, in their wisdom of the time, which ballistic technology and bullet construction has come a long way, so I don't want to beat up on that too much. At the time, they decided that kind of classic 40 Smith & Wesson load, it was good enough. And they decided to go with that. And for a long time, a lot of law enforcement agencies and stuff switched to 40 Smith & Wesson. And then they kind of actually looked at actual street data and realized, maybe it's not really any better than 9, and it costs more, and it beats up guns more, and it's got more recoil, and it's more unpleasant to shoot, and a bunch of other stuff. So they went back to 9, which I think was a wise choice. However, where does that leave the 10mm? Well, I think, and I've said this before, and you can disagree, but the de facto defensive handgun caliber of our time is 9mm. Period. Carte blanche, it's 9mm. If you have no other caveats. However, sometimes there are caveats. If you want a more powerful round, there are some options. 357 SIG is a good option. It's even more obscure than the 40 Smith & Wesson, although I've always thought that it was a better caliber than 40 Smith & Wesson, ballistically better and less recoil. So that doesn't really matter because it's less popular and pretty obscure. I do have a gun that came chambered in 357 SIG, although I converted it to 9mm just for cost. One of the big barriers to that is that it's expensive. The ammo is expensive, and not because it really costs any more to manufacture than a lot of other calibers, but because it's obscure. Economy of scale is a real thing, especially when it comes to shooting, especially if you buy your ammo by the case and actually train and take it serious, and don't just buy a random box of ammo on the shelf and think you're good for the year. That makes a big difference. Another good option is 45. 45 is a great caliber, and I think round per round, it's more effective than 9mm. Now, whether it makes up for the extra recoil, that's debatable, but it's debatable. The other option is 10mm, and 10mm is quite a bit more powerful. It's even quite a bit more powerful than standard pressure 45 ACP. And there are times when someone may want that extra power. One would be malum prohibitum, right? If your shall not be infringed has been infringed by some state entity or something that says, we are going to halfway neuter your magazine, and although all the engineering and everything went into a normal capacity magazine, we're going to decide that this amount of ammunition in your gun is safe and this amount is not. Well, if they do that, why not just go with a more powerful round? I mean, that kind of makes sense. I'm not saying it's always the right answer, but it might be the right answer, right? If you can only have 7 or 10 rounds of a certain in your handgun, you may decide that you might as well make that ammunition more powerful. So you might get less rounds, but you may only legally allowed to be had. You may only legally be allowed to possess so many rounds in a magazine. So there's one right there, an artificial kind of infringement that may push you to a more powerful round like 45 ACP or 10 millimeter. Another one is if there are other situations other than anti-personnel, other than person-to-person defense. And I still think even in the most remote areas, I lived in Alaska. Most places in Alaska, I would still consider people the more dangerous threat, even though I lived in a real high population density of coastal brown bears. A lot of those towns, you might be surprised, in Alaska seem to have a pretty big drug problem. And if you look up the violent crime rate in Alaska, it's pretty high, right? Even where I'm at in the rural Wild West, there are, brown bears, black bears, wild pigs, mountain lions, wolves, coyotes. But you know what? Look up all those animals put together and how many people they kill in, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Utah every year. And then look up in the same state how many people are killed by people. It's way, way more. So I still think that should be your primary focus. I don't care where you are unless you're just literally on some uninhabited island out in the middle of nowhere. Then if you're on that island and it's mostly brown bear, you can make the case your primary threat is brown bear. But mostly your primary threat is people in most places, especially east of the Mississippi. You live in a people hive, just deal with it. Your number one threat is people. I don't care if you strip down butt naked and rub yourself with honey and you walk through the forest, your number one threat probably is people, right? Rather than bears or something else. So, actually maybe fire ants in some places, but you get the idea. People are your number one threat, but you may have other threats that are a little bit more thick-skinned than people. Or maybe you want a dual-purpose hunting cartridge. And for that, the 10 millimeter really shines. The 10 millimeter is perhaps the best balance if I had to choose a semi-automatic handgun round for both people defense and animal defense and or animal hunting. The 10 millimeter is a decent round. Now, I've been blessed more than anybody that I know of to take a lot of animals with a handgun. I've taken more deer with a handgun, honestly, than I can remember. I would just be guessing at the number. I've taken a lot of deer with handgun, but I've taken them with cartridges like 38 Special, 9 millimeter, 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 ACP. So you don't need a 10 millimeter to take a deer, but I took that because that was my carry gun and I wanted to be good, and I figured if I was going to be good with something, it should be my carry gun. So that's why I've done that. If you're asking me straight up, the 10 millimeter is a better handgun hunting round than any of those cartridges heretofore mentioned. It's a good one. Now, if you're talking about revolvers in the mix, obviously 44, 45 long Colt, and I think the best crossover do-it-all-round is 357 Magnum. But if we're sticking with semi-auto, 10 millimeter is probably the best of the crossover rounds. Also, getting back to that economy of scale, I was actually blown away recently. I was doing some research, and prices change all the time, but the price round per round that I could find for ammo that I would actually shoot in 45 ACP and 10 millimeter was in a couple of cents of each other. That's kind of crazy. Again, that's a fairly new development. If you'd have looked that up 5 years ago, I don't think that would have been the case. But because 10 millimeter has seen a bit of resurgence, it's really not cost prohibitive to shoot compared to other niche calibers. Now, it's quite a bit more expensive than 9, but again, it's in the ballpark of 45 ACP, certainly cheaper than a lot of specialty rounds, 30 Super Carry, which is another round that saddens me that it exists. But, a lot of other rounds, 41 Magnum, it's not as affordable as 9, but it's not crazy expensive either. And because of that resurgence right now, there's a lot of really, really good handguns chambered in it. They still make the Colt Delta Elite in 10mm. They make the SIG Legion, the SIG 220, the 220 Legion, really good, hammer-fired guns, single action only, double single if you want it. Even if you want to slum it, there's the Glocks in 10mm. And if you want better ergonomics, but you want to stick with the polymer striker fire because that's what you're used to, they make the Smith & Wesson M&P10. They make the SIG the SIG P320 in 10mm. So there's a lot, and that's just a few, right? There's a lot of options in 10mm. Taurus just came out with a 10mm. If you want to trust your life to a Taurus 10mm, that's on you, but it exists, right? That's probably a good, affordable 10mm. So there's a lot of options, and the ammo is not crazy expensive. So if you're decent at controlling recoil already, right? If you're not good at shooting a 9mm, I do not advise you to buy a 10mm because you're trying to make up for your lack of skill with more power. That's not how that works, right? You're better off hitting somebody with a 22 than missing them with a 44 Magnum. And if you're not good at getting hits quickly and controlling recoil with a 9mm, a 10mm just ain't for you. That's like the guy that can't hit anything deer hunting and he goes and buys a bigger scope. That's not how that works. If you're not good at controlling recoil with a 9, you probably don't need to be messing around with a 10. But if you're good, at doing bill drills with a 9mm, and you think that for certain situations you would benefit from a 10mm, it's a solid choice in 2024. Getting back to the Esprit Day episode, the spirit of the episode, 10mm is probably a more viable choice in 2024 than it has been in a long time. So that's kind of the state of the cartridge address for 10mm in 2024. And if I talk more, I'm probably going to start beating a dead horse. So let's start wrapping it up here. It's a good choice in 2024 if it fits a need that you want. Your tactical tip of the day. Did you know that you can buy just sheets of Kevlar? If that's something that interests you, consider making your own bullet-resistant stuff. Those sheets of Kevlar that you can get, again, they're not cost prohibitive. So that's your tactical tip of the day, your tactical verse of the day. A short one, a very good one. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.